met with shocking reduction.
Time was 10:15 this morning. The place, Fort Bragg in Fayetteville. It was a military demonstration with hundreds of people watching. This is what happened.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stay in your bleachers. Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your bleachers. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay seated. We need fire equipment at the end of the drop zone. Ladies and gentlemen,
Got to go down there to find out.
please move to the rear of the bleachers as we ask.
Please stay here. Right now, you know as much as I do.
Ladies and gentlemen, please move to your numbered bus. Please move to your numbered bus.
Got to check that phone. Go back to the bus. Snag the whole rear there.
We can get an escort, please, of the MP battalion. We appreciate your help. Ladies and gentlemen, please move to your numbered bus. Please move to your numbered bus.
The cause of the accident is not known. Crash and rescue crews responded within a very short time and are on the scene now. On behalf of the commanding generals of these air crewmen, we extend our very deep sympathy to the friends and families of those involved.
Well, that officer's face tells the story. It's one of tragedy and one of sorrow. 5 people were killed in that crash, 4 members of the plane's crew and 1 soldier who was on the ground. Our own reporter, Janet Hundley, shot the footage that you just saw, and we'll be talking with her in just a few minutes. First, let's show you a map of exactly where it happened. This is Fort Bragg. The Sicily drop zone is the part in yellow on the map. The plane, of course, was from Pope Air Force Base, which is adjacent to Fort Bragg. And Sandra, there's a lot more to this story.
Charlie, you're right. There are several different facets to this story. And we've had Janet Hundley, Nina Schlossberg, and Carol Sparge all reporting on the story today. We'll talk with Janet in just a minute. Right now, Carol Sparge is with Live Star 5 to give us the latest. Carol, what can you tell us?
Sandra, investigators for the Air Force say it could be months before they know what caused this tragedy. The plane wreckage is strewn over a half-mile stretch of runway here. And this is the kind of routine flight that they take before crowds many times. The crowd, which was about 4,000 people, many of them are military people, and they have seen this a number of times. And it gets to the point where folks just expect everything to be okay, and they often forget that this can be dangerous. First, the Air Force showed off how the parachutes work. Generals dropped out of the C-130s to join the spectators.
Lieutenant General Foss, Commander, 18th Airborne Corps. Aircraft.
But the real crowd pleaser was about to begin. The C-130s were on their way in to drop off heavy equipment. Everyone, including Action News photographer Janet Hundley, was expecting a routine maneuver.
The plane was supposed to fly 5 feet off the ground. The idea is to show how the plane can drop the Army's heaviest equipment. But for some reason, this time, what should have been the highlight of the show turned to horror. It didn't seem real to me or the crowd.
Got to check that phone. Go back to the bus. Snag.
The site is still too hazardous to approach for any but trained rescue personnel. We will provide media access to the scene as soon as the situation here stabilizes.
Rescue crews raced to the fiery plane. It was a few hours before all the bodies were recovered. 4 of the dead were on board the C-130. The 5th victim, a Fort Bragg soldier, died when the plane ripped through his Jeep. He and some buddies had snuck into an unauthorized area to watch the show. Miraculously, none of the spectators were injured, and that's really amazing when you think that when the plane crashed, it skidded down the runway just 100 feet from the grandstand. Now, investigators will be out here again early in the morning looking through this, trying to find some clues. It does have a black box on board, much like the commercial planes that we all fly in. They're hoping, Charlie and Sandra, that will give them some clues as to what happened out here this morning.
All right, as we mentioned before, today's exercise was set up so VIPs and others could see the military in action. Janet Hundley was there to cover this event for us today. And the pictures that you've been seeing were seen through the lens of her camera this morning. She was there early on a mission just to cover the demonstration. Didn't think it would take very long, but it turned out to be this story. And Janet is with us. Now, Janet, you know, we all have to cover stories from time to time that are horrible, and this was one of those days for you. When did you first realize there was something wrong when you were looking through the camera?
Charlie, I didn't realize as I was looking through the camera that anything was wrong. I've been to at least 3 of these. This was my 4th. I've seen it several dozen times, just like most of the spectators in the crowd. And looking through my viewfinder, even though I did capture the plane hitting the ground on film, I didn't realize it had happened until much later when I viewed the tape.
Mm-hmm. I understand that sometimes in these runs that the wheels of the planes actually can touch the ground and then they just take right on back off. You probably thought that was happening. Tell me something, too. You sort of started your career in this area. You know a lot of those people on not only Pope Air Force Base, but Fort Bragg there. How did you feel personally about all of this?
Charlie, the only way to describe it is just numb. I was here covering the story, just like I've done many times, and something went wrong. I have never, in the 5 years or so that I've worked as a journalist, ever seen anything like this. I'm sure it'll be several days before the shock really hits.
The other thing that occurs to me, too, is that there were so many people there watching all of this. We heard reports that some of those people were collapsing and had to be assisted away from that area. Did you see any of that?
Yes, Charlie, I did. The amazing thing is I was cordoned off in an area with other media personnel, and we all watched it. We saw it. We saw the explosion, and even people, media people, who see this stuff, who hear about it, who cover it all the time, broke down into tears. They weren't able to shoot footage. It was just incredible, Charlie. There are no words, really, to describe how someone might feel in this situation.
Okay. Janet, thank you very much.
Good job. Of course, the reaction from people at Fort Bragg and Pope Air Force Base was also one of shock. We sent reporter Nina Schlossberg out to talk with some of the people who saw it all happen.
5 service members died today when a C-130 crashed during a capabilities exercise at Sicily.
The phones rang off the hook at the Fort Bragg Information Office today. People from all over the country wanted to know if their loved one was all right.
Her husband was supposed to jump today. She's concerned he was killed. Okay, well, the only Army casualty we have was on the ground at that time.
Meanwhile, busloads of stunned spectators made their way off post after the crash, many with memories they won't soon forget.
But it was really scary, and then all of a sudden there was a big explosion, fire everywhere, and the heat just started coming toward us, and we had to get out of there because it was real, the heat was bad.
I think it was a state of shock. They didn't realize what had really happened till we were told to remove and they saw the black smoke. It was an experience.
As an afternoon rain fell on the Officers Club, a few of the VIP guests began to make their way home. For them, it was an emotional day.
We all know people who do things like this, or we have husbands or children who do things of equal danger. And you never really think about how it could be them, but it could be any one of them at any time.
But those who felt it the most were those who fly those exercises routinely, and those family members waiting inside Womack Army Hospital for word of who survived. Nina Schlossberg, Action News 5, Fort Bragg.
And there is no word at this moment on the names of the victims of that crash. The military has not released those names. They're trying to notify the families involved. The plane that crashed, the C-130, is one of the military's workhorses. It is used to transport equipment and men all over the world. And Sky 5 pilot Frank Beal has talked with several C-130 experts. He's looked at the tape of today's crash and a successful drop from an earlier exercise.
The 4-engine turboprop C-130 Hercules has been the U.S. Air Force's workhorse for many years. It's used to transport combat troops and equipment. When heavy equipment is required by ground troops, the C-130 drops the cargo using the low-altitude extraction system, better known as LAPES. The equipment is placed on a platform in the cargo compartment. The platform sits on 2 rails with 4 parachutes attached to it. These parachutes will pull the load out of the aircraft during the low-altitude pass. During a routine LAPES drop, the C-130 makes a shallow approach to the drop zone. At approximately 50 feet, a small pilot chute is deployed. When the aircraft reaches an altitude of 5 to 10 feet, 3 larger chutes come out and the equipment platform is released. The platform is pulled out of the cargo compartment and slides to a stop in the drop zone. The C-130 then climbs out to cruising altitude. In today's accident at Fort Bragg, the C-130 seems to be at a higher than normal altitude when the pilot parachute is deployed. The parachute appears to make contact with the tail section. Simultaneously, the aircraft pitches its nose downward and the rate of descent increases before impact. Whether or not there was a mechanical malfunction or pilot error will be left up to the Air Force Accident Investigation Board. Sky 5 pilot Frank Beal, Raleigh.